Greetings, everybody. This is the most exciting turnout, so thank you, Arapaho Acres. My name's Bryan Isham. Some of you know me, many of you don't. I've only been here 8 years, so I'm a newcomer. And I know that many of you have been here a great deal longer than I have. I have been involved with Jen Jaffe and several other people who've been mulling around this idea of whether this neighborhood wants to do something in nature of getting some protections against additions, remodels that might not fit the neighborhood the way we'd like. I've had a few people ask me one question, and I've said, as I've passed out flyers over the past few weeks, I oversimplify this by saying we have historic registry designation, which is a plum for us. It's a feather in our cap, and a lot of people are very proud of that. But that does not mean that somebody can't come in and, my simple example, scrape off one of these houses and put up a Dutch colonial. Now, most people, when they hear that, they say, oh, well, I wouldn't want that. Maybe other people don't feel strongly about that, but this meeting is our opportunity to find out how people feel and whether we want to put something in place before a Dutch colonial gets put up. So, little show of hands, how many of you have been here for, say, 4 years or longer? Wow, okay. And I know we have some people who've been here for a great, great deal of time. And one reason I asked for that show of hands is because in talking with people, as we started promoting this meeting, many people said to me, oh, we've been here before. We've done this before. And I don't think that, from what I understand, that we've done exactly what we intend to do tonight before. So we are very fortunate to have some expert speakers with us this evening. We've got Adam Stevens, who's a real estate guru. Many of you have met Adam over the years because he's led walking tours in our neighborhood and so forth. I'm going to be reading a bio in just a moment. We have Kathy Corbett with us, a historic protection expert. We have Bryan Isham here with the City Planner's Office. We have Chelsea Nunnenkamp, our City Council person. So we've got a lot of people who are here and ready to give you an expert presentation that I cannot, because I'm by no means an expert on this matter. So if I may, I'm going to take a moment or two and introduce our speakers, and then I'm going to hand it on.
So Adam Stevens is a real estate agent who specializes in mid-century modern and modern real estate across the Denver metro area. He's the board vice president of the local chapter of DocoMono, which many of you may have heard of, US, a national organization that advocates for the documentation and preservation of modern architecture and design. Adam has lived in a Cliff May house in Denver's Hardy Park for over 20 years with his wife, 2 boys, dog, cat, and chickens. I'd like some eggs. And he regularly leads walking tours. What we do, may have met him again in our neighborhood. He also gives talks, writes articles, provides ongoing information on social media about the history of mid-century and modern architecture and design. He's always on the hunt to uncover more about the people and places that are a part of that history. Adam was a very important sponsor who provided financial support during the House and Garden tours that we had last year as part of our 75th anniversary events. You can follow Adam on Instagram and Facebook. Kathy Corbett, who is with us this evening, is an architectural historian and historic preservation professional who's been working in the preservation field in Colorado since 2004. Her business, Corbett AHS Inc., specializes in helping people document and save the places they love. She also works for the Landmarks Division of the City and County of Denver and teaches Intro to Historic Preservation at UCD. She lives in University Hills with her college professor spouse and 2 dogs, and says she's very happy to be here. Well, we are very happy to have her. So with that, I'm going to turn the baton over to Adam. And take it away, Adam.
All right, so welcome. I'm honored to be able to be here to talk to you about historic preservation in what I have long called the crown jewel of mid-century modern neighborhoods in the city. As was mentioned in my introduction, I specialize in selling mid-century modern neighborhoods, but I also specialize in teaching about mid-century modern design. Let me get this thing. I didn't realize this was on the screen. Here we go. And so I'm going to give you kind of a high level talk about kind of what your options are for historic preservation. And we're going to talk about conservation overlay, which is kind of the big thing. But I want to start with just kind of an overview of what your other options are. And instead of talking about Arapaho Acres specifically, and I am just having all sorts of technical issues. Now my remote doesn't feel like working. I am going to actually talk about this in context of my own neighborhood. So I live over in the Cliff May Homes, which is in Harvey Park, roughly Lowell and Yale, if you know where that is. It's a group of 170 mid-century modern homes that were all built in the 1950s. This is what a typical Cliff May home looks like. They were built between 1954 and 1956. And they are pretty well preserved here in Denver. They were actually built across the country. Cliff May was a California designer. He wasn't really an architect. In fact, he didn't even graduate college, but he became famous designing homes for the rich and famous in California. But during a short stint in his career in the early 1950s, he conceived this prefabricated system of homes with an architect in California that he had big ideas of selling across the country, which he did. So even though there are thousands of these Cliff May homes in California, we actually have 170 of them here in Denver, which is the biggest group of them outside of California. So we have felt for many years like that is something that makes our neighborhood historically significant over in Harvey Park. And for years, we've been talking about what we should do about that. And so through that, I've learned that there are lots of different options. This is what and I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Cliff May homes here. These 170 homes are all grouped together in a 6-block area right here around Harvard and Yale. This is what I actually sold this house a couple of years ago. This was a very original Cliff May home. And they have a very simple architectural language. They have board and batten siding. They have what we call the glass gable, clear story windows above, full height glass, deep roof overhangs. And because it's a prefabricated system, they're all made out of the same kit of parts. But among that same kit of parts, there were actually 7 different models offered in Harvey Park, which is pretty wild. In 1954, it was actually unusual for a builder to offer more than one floor plan. So to offer 7 different floor plans was really unusual, but they ranged from 2 bedrooms and 1 bath all the way up to 4 bedrooms and 2 baths. And this one we're looking at here is a 3-bedroom, 1-bath home. Another big aspect of these houses was that Cliff May, the homes that he designed for the rich and famous, were giant houses, like 12,000 square foot homes that rambled across the lot, and they were big enough that they could create private courtyards in the middle of the house. So in these prefabricated houses, Cliff May was trying to recreate that idea using garden walls to create these private outdoor spaces. And here's just some more general photos. And you can see with the full height glass, like this house actually looks into that private outdoor living space. And the way we treat it in this neighborhood is it is our private outdoor living room. And it's an important part to the design of these houses. Here's another one here. A lot of the houses have L-shaped floor plans like this one. You look at all the glass that's looking onto this private outdoor living space. And here's a look at the prefabricated system. It's actually a panelized system that they poured the foundation, and then the houses arrived flat packed on a truck like a piece of IKEA furniture, and the panels were tilted up on site. And Cliff May bragged that he could erect a house in 24 hours. And then it would take a couple weeks after that to do the interior finish. And here's an example of some people putting up a Cliff May home. And I'm just going through these really quickly because I only have a short amount of time. So the other interesting thing is because this is a panelized prefabricated system, these homes are also modular, which is how they were able to offer 7 different floor plans. So this is the smallest floor plan. And if you take that floor plan and you add a little wing, then you have a 3-bedroom, 1-bath. And if you extend that wing, now you have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and there you have 3 different models right there just by adjusting the modules. And each of the panels is 64 inches wide, so all these houses are laid out on a 64-inch grid. And you can see here, there's a streetscape in this historic photo here. You can see the fences in front of the houses there, creating those private outdoor living spaces across the street. And here's a kid playing inside one of those private outdoor living spaces. And here's what an original fence would have looked like in front of the house. So one of the options we could have pursued, or could pursue, is a historic district. And this is traditionally the most strict option. If you're really interested in preserving the homes just as they are, a historic district is the way to go. And Denver has a very robust historic district. In their planning department, they even have people just devoted to maintaining historic homes and historic districts. And the process of having an historic district established is quite the process. So first, an application has to be submitted by the public to the planning department. The planning department will review the application and kind of massage it and make sure everything is as it should be before it actually goes on to the Historic Preservation Commission. And it may take several months to get an application that is actually worth pushing forward. During that time, public outreach is really important. So if we really wanted to make this happen, we would have to get it buy-in of a substantial number of people, because we're talking, for our neighborhood, 170 houses. And the idea that 170 households in the neighborhood would all be in support of a historic district would be a long shot, I would say. But you try, you hold meetings, you send out mail, you make sure people know that this is something that's going to happen, because it is something that affects your property rights. If the application is then approved by the planning office, then it gets sent on to the Historic Preservation Commission. And what they'll do is they'll actually send mail out to all the residents in the neighborhood, warning them that, hey, your neighborhood is being considered to become a historic district. There's going to be a public hearing in front of the Historic Preservation Commission. You should show up, make your public comment, make sure people know, make sure the Historic Preservation Commission knows what your opinion is as to whether you want to be part of a historic district or not. And so they hold a public hearing in front of the Historic Preservation Commission, and ultimately, based on public comment and the quality of the application and whatnot, the Historic Preservation Commission will then vote and decide whether that application gets pushed forward to City Council. If they decide that it gets pushed forward to City Council, then there is another public hearing scheduled. More mail goes out so that nobody's in the dark. And the public hearing happens at City Council. There's public comment and all the things, and ultimately City Council votes on whether the historic district would go forward or not. I can say, at least in Denver, his city councilmen don't have much of a stomach for what's called owner-opposed landmarking or historic districts. If they feel like there's strong opposition to it, they're not going to vote for it. And if they don't vote for it, it will not happen. But if it does happen, then it becomes law. And after it becomes law, then living in a historic district becomes a little more tedious in that any changes that you make to your home's street-facing exterior then have to go under the magnifying glass of the Historic Preservation Commission. And so whether that's changing your windows or changing your doors or your roof or your siding or anything like that, that all needs to be reviewed, even if you're not pulling a permit on it. You're legally obligated then to maintain what we call the character defining features of your home, which should be all those different details. And so if you want to make a change to your door and the Historic Preservation Commission says, no, you can't put that door in your house, then you can't put that door in your house. That's the right you're giving up to live in a historic district. Now, they don't dictate paint colors typically, at least not in Denver, so you can still paint your house whatever color you want. And they don't dictate anything inside the home. So if you wanted to completely renovate the inside of your house, You can do whatever you want. And so in the case of this house, if we were talking about protecting the neighborhood, this house has its original board and batten siding. So if you wanted to change the siding, you would have to stick with this original board and batten siding or some kind of replica of it. The windows, this full height glass, that's a character defining feature of these houses. These windows are what are called stile and rail windows. They actually arrived on site as pre-assembled units with the glass already installed in the wood frames. And instead of installing the windows into an opening like you would a traditional window, these windows are actually nailed up like a piece of siding on the outside of the house, which is a really unique way of installing windows that I think was a product of both needing to make them shippable, but also needing to have something that unskilled labor could install to make things more affordable. And so this becomes a part of the house's history. So if you wanted to upgrade your windows or change your windows, the Historic Preservation Commission would require you to put exactly these windows onto your house, which would come at great expense because they are hand-built wood windows and they're custom. These aren't something you can buy off the shelf. The roofing material, if it has its original tar and gravel, they might require you to maintain the tar and gravel. It's hard to say. But overall, the requirements are very strict. If they wanted to change that door, they might have to go with a door that's consistent with what's original to the house. But again, this is all in the name of keeping the architectural integrity of these homes, which might be important to the neighborhood. And an example here in our Arapaho Acres, again, if somebody wanted to make a change to the windows on this house, for instance, the requirement would be to have windows that match what's already there. But if somebody wanted to remove this wall on the inside of this house, you could go ahead and do that. Nothing would prevent you from doing that. If you wanted to take this kitchen out, that would be okay in a historic district. I wouldn't be okay with it personally, but there's nobody at the city who would stop you. So conservation overlay is starting to become kind of a thing that's easier for people to stomach, but it's not really a historic preservation tool formally. What a conservation overlay is really doing is it's taking the zoning code, it's hacking the zoning code to try to provide some level of preservation for a neighborhood. So it basically cuts out the middleman, it cuts out the Historic Preservation Commission. They're not part of it at all. So if you wanted to make any changes to your house in a conservation overlay, you're just going through the zoning department and getting your zoning permit and then your building permit and whatnot. So what that means though is that what's actually protected on the house is limited. And a great example for us to look at is the neighborhood of Crisana Park in southeast Denver, because they actually have a conservation overlay in place successfully. So Crisana Park is a group of 174 homes built at the same time as the Cliff May homes. They were competition to the Cliff May homes, and they are loose copies of Eichler homes built in California. Some might say even the designs were stolen to some extent. They are also in a group, just like the Cliff May homes and just like Arapaho Acres. And they have a pretty consistent architectural language, and by and large, there's some pretty good, they're pretty well intact architecturally. Here's a typical floor plan of one in the neighborhood, like a lot of 1950s builders. In the case of this one, there was only one floor plan in the neighborhood. But in that floor plan, they had 6 different elevations. So if you go through the neighborhood, it still looks like there's a bunch of different home designs, but really there's just this one single 3-bedroom, 2-bath floor plan. And just here's some examples of homes in the neighborhood. Like the Cliff May homes, there's also kind of a component of an outdoor living space that they advertise as a lanai behind a garden wall. Here's an interior shot. Here's a different kind of elevation than the other ones you've seen, but it's still the exact same floor plan. Another elevation. And even this house is the same floor plan, but what's happening here is the house has been turned 90 degrees So the broad side of the house is facing the street, and it has a whole different roof line, but it's still the exact same floor plan. But the neighborhood had started to become concerned when things like this started to happen. If you'll notice the house on the left. Now, their initial mission, they wanted to do a historic district, and they started exploring the idea of doing a historic district and quickly became overwhelmed, realizing that getting approval among 174 houses is probably not going to be doable. And so they started looking at a conservation overlay as an alternative. And their city councilman said that, you know, he would be happy to bring the conservation overlay to city council, because that's basically how you'd have to get a conservation overlay done. You'd have to go through your city councilman to actually introduce a bill to get that zoning change made. And the city councilman said, if I can get broad support, like I think it was in the 90-some%, I'll go ahead and do it. We'll get it done. And they did get that level of support in the neighborhood, and it did get done. So here's another example of something that the neighbors were aghast about. And so here is what the conservation overlay in Cressana Park looks like. They did 6 things in the neighborhood. And this is the introduction here. The intent of the Cressana Park Conservation Overlay is to apply additional building form standards that are consistent with the established character of the Cressana Park neighborhood, while allowing some flexibility consistent with overall character. The established character of the neighborhood includes single-story or split-level single-family houses with low-pitched roof line profiles and a strong horizontal emphasis without rooftop decks. Additions are intended to be compatible in scale and proportion of the original buildings. So what this alludes to is that a conservation overlay, and when I say we're hacking the zoning code, only affects building form. It does not affect building details. So it can't talk about your doors and windows. It can't talk about your siding. All it talks about is how your building is placed on the lot and what part of the lot it is built in. And I'll go into that a little more detail here. So the first thing they did is they split the lot 50-50 from front to back. So they have what they call the front base plane, the rear base plane. Basically, they're saying that in the split, they're starting at the ground on the back for anything for the back of the house, and the level of the ground on the front for the front of the house. And they're saying that also they're restricting height to 1.5 stories, so you can't have a second story pop up there anymore. There's a maximum height of 18 feet, which again, that's supposed to stop pop-ups that would have a second story on top. And it says there shall be no permitted height increase for the lot width over 50 feet. So if a lot is for some reason wider than typical, you don't get to go over that 18 feet. So, and to explain what they say here, so they're talking about on number 3, the bulk plane is kind of like the imaginary box on your lot in which you can build a house or have a house exist. And they've split it into 2 sides. So in the front 50%, they are saying that there is a maximum roof pitch. So to stay in character of the neighborhood, you can't go over a certain roof pitch. So, you know, talking about like putting up a Dutch colonial or something that would have a steeper roof pitch, you can't do that. And they're adjusting on the sides of the lot, they're adjusting how high the house could be. So the house can't be taller than 10 feet on the sides of the house. And then in the back of the lot, they're saying that you can go up to 18 feet, or no, you can go up to, your sides of your lot can go up to 14 feet and your maximum height is 18 feet. And so here's a diagram that shows exactly what they're allowing now. So the idea here again is we're hacking the zoning code to discourage people from putting another floor on top of their house, or discouraging people from knocking down a house and building a 2-story house or 3-story house. And they're putting limitations on that, even if they knock a house down and build another one, how tall that house can be so that it won't tower over the other houses in the neighborhood. And here's the restriction on roof pitch. And then they're also making a little adjustment in the back. So the typical rear setback in this neighborhood is 20 feet. That means you can't build within 20 feet of the back of your lot. In this case, they're decreasing that to 15 feet. That's kind of a compromise to say, well, since you can't add another story, we're going to give you a little more space behind your house to expand your house to the rear if you wanted to. And then they're also specifically prohibiting second-story decks or roof decks. So one thing you'll notice is that there's no restriction on demolition. You can't use the conservation overlay to stop demolition. Demolition is wholly allowed in a conservation overlay. The conservation overlay, again, it doesn't affect doors, windows, any of the character-defining features of the house. We're just affecting the building form. A couple other things that you could adjust in a conservation overlay is you could restrict roof overhangs. So, for instance, if we were doing the Cliff May homes, you might standardize this 30-inch roof overhangs that the houses have. In the Cliff May homes, since all the houses have exactly the same roof pitch, I would think we'd write into an overlay there. Every house must be that standard Cliff May roof pitch. And we would try to avoid having a house taller than a typical Cliff May home. Whether or not we allow extra height to do 1.5 stories in the back or something like that would be an open question. And another thing is, you noticed when I was showing you those photos that the Cliff May homes have all of those front fences. A lot of those houses have lost their front fences. Through the years, people demolished them for whatever reason, and technically they're illegal in Denver, and I think in most places you can't have a front fence taller than 4 feet. So we could actually use a conservation overlay to legalize those front tall fences. We could say you can have a front fence up to 6 feet, which a lot of people have built and are getting away with, but the city could come along and tell everybody to tear all their fences down, which we don't want, and we could use a conservation overlay to do that. And so, like, this is a Cliff May home here. You'll notice it doesn't have its original siding, it doesn't have its original windows. In a historic district, you wouldn't be able to do any of this that this house has, but in a conservation overlay, this would all be okay. So that's kind of the difference in the level of protection. And one of the other options you have, just to make a passing mention of it, is let's say we decide we don't want to do a conservation overlay or a historic district. You do, as an homeowner, for a long time, Englewood had not had any tools for you to landmark a house or create a historic district. But as you probably heard, last year the city did pass an ordinance that now covers the ability to landmark a house or create a historic district. That's now a tool that's available to you. So if you decided, well, I at least want to protect my house, you could submit an application and go through the whole process to get your house individually landmarked. So that if the whole neighborhood is otherwise getting knocked down, at least your house will stay. So I just want to finish up real quick here before we go to questions and whatnot. With a notion that as a real estate agent, we go to real estate school to get our license, and my grandma had this imagination that real estate school was them showing me how to show homes and put up signs and all those things. But really, we just learn the principles of real estate and also how not to get in trouble legally. And one of the principles we were taught, which is kind of an appraisal principle, but it's kind of an overriding principle through all of real estate, is this notion of highest and best use. And really, when property developers are doing their job, they are doing their job best when they are maximizing the profits of a piece of land. That is highest and best use. So, down in Littleton, at Broadway and Littleton Boulevard, a bank was recently knocked down to build a gas station. So that developer decided the highest and best use of that land was a gas station at that moment. In several years, it might be a strip mall, might be a neighborhood, might be an apartment building. But ultimately, things change. Cities change, cities evolve. Englewood looks nothing like it did 100 years ago. And even though Arapaho Acres has been very fortunate through people appreciating its architecture and, of course, the hard work of Diane Ray to do preservation through education, not much has been lost in Arapahoe Acres so far. But right now, the highest and best use of Arapahoe Acres, which I think we all generally agree is as a historic area of these wonderful homes, there is nothing stopping somebody who has a different idea of what highest and best use is from coming into the neighborhood and doing that idea. So whether it's a couple who's like, they look at Arapahoe Acres and they're like, look at this place. It gets the highest price per square foot in the whole city. And it probably really does. I think if we looked at the data, man, we could knock a house down if we built our 5,000 square foot, 3-story dream home there and built all those square feet. Imagine what we could make on that. Now, I don't know if somebody would actually come in and do that, but somebody could. Somebody could come in with what their own definition of highest and best use is. You know, that there's a city next door, starts with the letter D. They've got a crazy idea going on that I hate. I'm not a fan of it, but they seem to be excited about it. And it's this whole idea that, you know, Denver has a housing shortage, and they feel like the best way to confront their housing shortage is to eliminate single-family zoning. It's a real idea that they're pursuing. So like a neighborhood like mine, Harvey Park, which is all single-family homes, they want to eliminate single-family zoning. So that would give developers an opportunity to come in, knock down a house, build, say, a duplex or a triplex if the lot were big enough. And the idea would be you'd be building more inventory of these highly inefficient single-family neighborhoods. I don't think it would create affordable housing, because what I see happening is developers buying the $400,000 starter homes in my neighborhood and building $700,000 duplexes, but I'm not going to get into that. But that's a real idea that they're exploring. And imagine if Englewood got that harebrained idea, eliminating single-family zoning. What do you think might happen to Arapahoe Acres then? People might decide the highest and best use for Arapahoe Acres or anywhere else in Englewood is a bunch of duplexes. And there'd be real money to be made with that. So with doing something, whether it's a historic district or a conservation overlay, you have an opportunity now to decide once and for all what the highest and best use of Arapahoe Acres is. Because if you create a historic district or a conservation overlay, that's you putting your foot down and saying, the highest and best use of Arapahoe Acres is keeping it as it is, as this historic place. So you have that choice to take that action now and do that and lock that in, instead of just going by chance and hoping that preservation through education is going to be enough. And I know there's been a lot of contention in the neighborhood. Some people want to protect their property rights, and I get it. As a real estate agent, I want you to protect your property rights. And there are the others who want to protect the historic character of their neighborhood. And I'm with them too as a historian. And I know there must be common ground to be found somewhere in there, because really the problem is not your neighbor. Your neighbor's not the problem. The problem is all the outside forces around Arapahoe Acres who are going to come to their own decisions as to what the highest and best use of Arapahoe Acres is. And as soon as that couple gets the demolition permit for their 5,000 square foot dream home, it's too late. So now is the time to act before those things start to happen. And so I'm going to leave you with that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Adam. And now we have Kathy. Did you want to present a few things, or you just want to take some questions?
Well, I could take some questions. I could say a few things, and
Okay.
there's
Did you have some slides you wanted to do?
no, I don't have any slides, but I did have a couple of bits that I thought we could look at. But
While they're getting that ready, I just wanted to say,
yeah, I think it would be a good. And I was mostly here to help answer questions.
right. So what I wanted to say is that we are encouraging people to bring their questions to this discussion tonight. Out of respect for time, we are going to I'm going to have a little stopwatch, 2 minutes or less, with your question. And then Kathy or Adam or Bryan can answer some of these questions that people have. And so 2 of us will be manning the area to keep an eye out. I see you, Marcia. To keep an eye out for people who have questions so that everybody knows that they will be heard. And it's really our hope that after you've had a chance to get any questions answered, that we might be able, as a group, to say, what would we like to see if we'd like to see an overlay? So we may ask for a little quick show of hands. Apparently we've gotten quite a few ballots already dropped in the box, which is really delightful. We've had a wonderful turnout tonight that is pleasing us all no end. So thank you again for responding to emails and flyers and so forth. But we will be taking those questions and then we have this whiteboard here so that we can attempt to craft something and see if we can leave this evening having done something, because I don't know about you guys, but I will say that orchestrating things like this and pulling all these people together, I'm not eager to do it again. We don't have to. So anything we can accomplish tonight, we'd love to do. But that said, I also wanted to reassure everybody that at the end of this evening, if you don't feel comfortable voting yet on any of these issues, we're going to extend the voting period. And we also know that a number of people couldn't be here this evening due to prior commitments or traveling or whatever, so there will be an opportunity after this meeting later on to submit things. And there are people tuning in via Zoom right now. We're going to be sending them electronic ballots, and so bottom line is you will be heard. So Kathy, I think I'm going to let Kathy go first, and then we will open up for questions, okay?
Thanks. And I am really mostly here just to kind of try to help answer questions around what Denver has done. You know.
This is not Denver. This is Englewood.
Wait a minute.
Denver doesn't.
Yeah, no, what?
It's going to be helpful for me to see what other people have.
Yeah, we're basically just trying to give you an example of what's been done, so you could see if you think that this might be something appropriate for you. One of the things, and this is just something that I just wanted to quickly put up, the Center for Preservation Research at UCD was helping the Chrisanna Park neighborhood think about what was valuable about their neighborhood and about the architecture and interesting architectural history, and put together basically a really informative booklet about the history of mid-century modern and the different styles that we see, and the kind of some of the background there. This is just a file that I had that I thought you might find of interest. So, but different kinds of elements that mid-century modern architecture brings to the table, specifically talking about things like privacy, asymmetry, different kinds of materials, the way that concrete block was used in some contexts, post and beam construction, indoor-outdoor connections. These are some, and the different ways that people approach landscape. So these are some of the different models, and Adam went over this really. So some of this is kind of redundant, but I thought this was just something that you might find of interest. I really don't have a long talk prepared. I guess I'm just gonna try to answer some questions around that. I will say one thing, Alvin, right there. When I live in the University Hills neighborhood in Denver, it's basically bounded by Colorado Boulevard and I-25 and Hampton. I live in the south part of University Hills. I live in a 1951 tract home. It was built by George Johnson and Ted Hutchinson. We have only 2 houses that have been replaced on our block, and that makes us kind of unusual. As you get closer to Eisenhower Park, there's one block in which the majority of the houses on that block have been replaced. These are houses that don't really bear any, they don't bear a lot of similarity with the original houses. We had at one point a kind of a cohesiveness, and we've lost that. But I would encourage you, if you're interested, Go take a walk around University Hills. We're a wonderful neighborhood. I'm on the board. I'm on the neighborhood organization, University Hills Neighborhood Association board. We all get along, but the character of the neighborhood has largely been lost. What it was, and its historic importance and its historic look and feel as a post-war neighborhood is falling down. There's different styles. Some of them don't really have names. A lot of them are neo-traditional. There's some I call Lego style. There's one new style that I've called Monk's Head because it has it looks like it's just got a hood. Like in a Monty Python movie, anyway. So look at other neighborhoods and look what's going on. There's a massive amount of redevelopment going on in the metro area. Not just Denver, not just Englewood, but look around. You have a treasure. You have a treasure in Arapaho Acres. I will say that I hope you can keep it. I hope you can. What questions did you had a question? Yes.
What is in your explanation on Wood Trees, what the difference between design guidelines and a conservation overlay are? I've decided on this historic commercial district, which I was involved in, that's what they purport is design guidelines. And then those become iterated where you have a series of choices and then certain materials that you reuse. And then I didn't hear anybody mention something about creating an ordinance where you just don't allow spray box tree. That if you make that a law, and there can be no spray box, even without conservation overlay.
Okay. And you're with, yeah. And that's an Englewood question. So here.
I'm an Englewood person, so I can answer that. Hi, I'm Chelsea Nunnenkamp. I'm your city council person. I had met some of you before at a block party or at the Chalk Festival or something like that. I want to start saying I really love your neighborhood. I live just to your south across Dartmouth in the Robbins Park neighborhood, but if I see me walking my dog in your neighborhood, it's a lovely place to be. It's lovely to see so many neighbors out tonight in what I can only describe as a really beautiful democratic process where we're going to come together and you're going to decide, what do you want for your neighborhood? Home is really personal to all of us, and that's why you're here tonight, and I'm really grateful that you're showing up in this way, although I'm sure there's different opinions in the room. I want to kind of answer, how would we do this? What would the difference between design guidelines and overlay be, and then what would a spray box ordinance look like? And then I'm going to pass it to someone who knows much more than me, our planning expert here, Bryan, at the city, just to keep me honest. But a little bit about what this would look like. So, as was noted in an earlier presentation, the city of Englewood currently has a historic preservation ordinance where we had asked for 65% of the homeowners in a neighborhood to sign on to have the historic district. So,
wait. The question is about design guidelines.
Yep, I'm gonna get there. I'm just giving you a little bit of context, okay? That currently does not, so that's what we have available. And I was approached by some members of your community who said, hey, that's what we need in Arapaho Acres. So we don't actually have the conservation overlay in our code currently. We would have to first pass the ability to have a conservation overlay in the city of Englewood, and then we would actually have to then do the conservation overlay for Arapaho Acres.
And do you have a tool for design to guide?
Yeah, so that level of detail is a little bit further down the road, and I'm going to pass it to Bryan, who's going to give you a little bit more detail about how we would enforce that, or if you can answer that. We have looked at different demolition permits in the past, demolition to reduce scrapes. We don't currently have that in our code. It's not something that's tied to the conservation ordinance. It would be a separate political conversation. My role tonight is to hear what you all want, and then when I hear what the neighborhood wants, for me to go advocate for what you want with my colleagues on city council. So I'm looking forward to listening, but I also wanted to provide a little bit of context about where we are in this process, and that there'll be a few votes to get to. I know you really want to get to design guidance, so I'm going to pass it to Bryan.
So you said design guidelines, you mostly work with them in commercial neighborhoods. I don't know that I've ever seen design guidelines in a residential neighborhood setting. Generally see them in commercial areas. We have some downtown, so the 33 core and 500 block of Arapahoe has their own set of design guidelines adopted earlier this year. For the overlay process, or for a scrape ordinance, like Chelsea said, it would have to be something adopted by council, totally separate from what we're doing here. For the overlay process, the first thing that we'd have to do, or that you would have to do, is find a council member to support a change in our zoning ordinance. So that's Title 16, the Unified Development Code, to create the process, to create an overlay district. And then you'd have to go through the process of coordinating that conservation overlay district in your area by identifying, what kind of characteristics are you trying to preserve, whether it's the roof slope, which I noticed in your neighborhood, or are your buildings kind of pushed to one side? I know there's some neighborhoods where the buildings are only like 2 foot off property lines and 7 or 8 foot off another one. I don't know if that occurs in your neighborhood, but you look at the form and design of your layout of your lot and your building, things like that. For historic preservation, that's a choice that you can make as an individual homeowner or as a group. As a group, you'd have to have the 65% of the property owners sign off on it. As an individual homeowner, you just have to have everybody that is on your deed sign off on pursuing that process. Each one has its own pros and cons. So from a conservation overlay district, the pros are that the reviews are ultimately administrative through staff. If you want to make changes to your building, you just have to meet certain requirements, right? The requirements that you as a group would set up. Historic preservation overlay gives you, if you have the local designation, it can help you get access to tax dollars to think renovations to your home. Conservation overlay doesn't do, conservation overlay does not do that. So each one has its own benefits. So it's really up to you guys as a group to really talk out what kind of things are you trying to do as a group to figure out the best path forward for your neighborhood.
And what the city did downtown, Englewood did downtown, and with design guidelines, did that all the conservation overlay? Is there a distinction between those two first, design guidelines and conservation overlay?
There is. A conservation overlay would be an ordinance. Those design guidelines are not an ordinance. They're a best practice. Here's what we want you to do. They can be challenged and pushed back on. Conservation overlay is part of the zoning code. It's an ordinance and it's a requirement. If they're adopted, these things have to be done to move forward.
So if you pass the ordinance where you didn't allow scrape offs, you could still continue working on what your overlay or your design guidelines would be. If you were really concerned about something disappearing tomorrow, that might be a strategy for curing it?
That would be up to you all to pursue with a council member. Not.
What's your opinion?
I don't have an opinion. I'm just here as a helper to get you through the process.
Bryan said a lot of opinions. I would like to have opinions. I would just say the political will to get 4 votes on city council right now for a scrape off ordinance would be very, very hard. The fastest path to protecting your neighborhood would be the overlay district or the current historic district that's in our code. Not to say that there's not merit in a scrape off ordinance, and that's a discussion, but I don't think that will help you in the near term. I may consider.
We have a question over here.
Yeah, just quick question, just clarification.
Should they use the
I think
stand?
yeah. I think Adam did a great job, by the way. He really cut to the chase, and he showed really good examples. I do this commercially for a living on big projects, so I understand the terminology, I understand what's going on. But a lot of people probably in the room they don't. So those examples are really good. I think we should go back to kind of talking about what Chris Nunnenkamp did and the conservation overlay, right? I think one question is, do those bulk claim and what they, set up as their criteria for the bulk claims, the setback, the heights, does that apply right now to Chris Nunnenkamp with scrapes? So somebody scrapes, which is what happened with my house for the most part. I live at 3030 South Cornell. But the architect who, was really in tune with the neighborhood and originally wanted to move into the neighborhood, it was very, very good. Obviously, put the house back together to fit the aesthetic of the neighborhood.
Well, okay.
But let me, so that's the question. The real question is, in the overlay, does that apply to a screen?
We will defer to someone who knows the Denver code.
Well, the answer is yes. So if a house is scraped, it needs to follow the overlay. And that's kind of the idea of having the overlay, so that anything that's filled as a replacement is still in character with the neighborhood, at least in a building form standpoint. One other thing I neglected to mention, it's kind of off that topic a little bit, but I wanted to make sure it's said, is that whether you do a conservation overlay or a historic district, anything in the neighborhood that's already been changed that wouldn't be compliant with that overlay or historic district gets grandfathered over. So it's not like you'll be forced to bring your house back to what it originally was when that is established.
Thank you. And I agree. I think it's been very helpful to see examples of different houses in different neighborhoods. Yes, I do see you. I see you. But we're not really trying to compare ourselves to other places. I just want everybody here in this room to realize what we're trying to achieve tonight. We have a blank slate, right? In terms of what we can ask for. Ideally, we'll be reasonable about it. Ideally, we're going to have consensus in this room. I am sensing, and I wouldn't mind taking a show of hands very early to see how many people in this room feel that they would like to go as far as a landmark designation for this neighborhood, which is very, very restrictive, as Adam said. The conservation overlay concept is a beginning point, and you could certainly start with a conservation overlay, as I understand it, and then later decide that you'd like to do more. But you can't backpedal from a landmark designation, for example. Yes.
I'd like to make a point of clarification. It's my understanding that we are a national register, a Colorado state, and it's an Englewood landmark district. Now,
We are not a landmark, no. We do not have historic landmark protections against anybody doing some of the things we've
the
described.
protections in the same way the National Register doesn't, but we are an Englewood landmark.
No. The city of Englewood has only had a landmark designation process since 2023, and there's no neighborhood that's been designated. So protection from scrapes, things like that for nationally registered, there's no protection unless they take.
Understanding of the time of the National Register nomination was passed, that like the state of Colorado, if a building or a district is listed at a national register, it automatically becomes listed on the state register, and that similarly, it also is automatically listed at the local level.
I don't know about how it works for state and nationally, but locally, that was not happening. You have to adopt something locally for it to be locally designated. Local designation is the only designation that can help protect you from scrapes.
I understand that, Kiss.
Just to try to clarify that, so, Michael, go ahead, Bruce.
If a site in Colorado is designated on the National Register, it is automatically placed on the state register. But local landmark ordinances are independent of national and state register. So for instance, South High School what has been a local landmark in Denver since 1995, but only in 2022 was placed on the national and state register of historic places. So these things aren't as connected.
Thank you.
And just to explain why it's not automatic, is because, again, as a real estate agent, and would be, encouraging you to be interested in protecting your property rights, to take away the rights that people have on their property, it needs to be a robust process where people have the opportunity to have an opinion, opportunity to be heard at hearings and things like that. And so, the process that you went through for the National Register does not have that robustness. And that is why that it is not locally landmarked. You can't just take people's property rights away without a robust process.
Okay, thank you. You have a question?
Sure.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Cameron Richards. I actually am one of the two people that raised their hand for living here less than 4 years. So anyway, I think my questions really just were, as I'm understanding it, there is not even provision in the Englewood code at the moment to create a conservation overlay? Okay, so we'll just presuppose that. So then who is responsible for drafting the requirements of the conservation overlay?
Still a hard question to answer because we don't have a process. So that generally is figured out later when creating the process. I looked at what the city of Denver did, and I get it. I work in planning. I don't like comparing myself to other cities either. But they work through a process where it sounds like they actually work with a neighborhood. So it's not me walking out saying, here's what you need to do to meet and fit into with this neighborhood. You work for the neighborhood, so the neighborhood helps to identify the characteristics of their homes that they want to protect. At least that's the way the process works there, and I would hope that the process would be very similar here, because it's not, me as the planner saying this is what needs to happen. It's really working with the group, the neighborhood, trying to figure out what their end goal is for their neighborhood and what they're trying to protect in the neighborhood. All right, we stop.
Isn't there a block called Englewood that has an overlay? I've heard that there is a block of like 5-8 houses, something like that.
There's a neighborhood preservation overlay that was adopted, but they do a lot more with land use, which is not what a conservation overlay district does.
Thank you.
This is a question way in the back, Devin.
I just wanted their task for clarification, please. It's my understanding Englewood does have a process for establishing conservation districts. It's just that the language of the specifics of if this neighborhood should seek a full person, and those specifics would need to be drafted. But there is a process for establishing conservation district and overlay district. Englewood has overlay districts, right?
We have one, like I just mentioned, we have a neighborhood preservation overlay that was adopted some years ago.
Right.
As far as creating a conservation overlay district process, no, there is no process that exists.
How effort would it be for creating an overlay district?
Sorry, I didn't really hear you. What was that?
How different would it be from just creating an overlay district, which you already have a process for?
So we would have to create what's called a zoning text amendment. So that's generally, is anybody aware of what Code Next was? Show of hands. Okay, so we're going through a similar process where we're making an amendment to that code. It requires public hearings in Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council, and then two readings at City Council. Usually, just the adoption process is about 5 months, 4 to 5 months. Generally, there's a few study sessions ahead of that with our City Council and our Planning and Zoning Commission, where we're talking to them about what the proposed amendments would look like. So it can be a pretty lengthy process just to get there. And then on top of the process of actually going through, if that's adopted, then going through the overlay process, added on top of that. I'll let you all call the people out. Yes.
Since we had decided then that it would be a separate thing to hear an ordinance about scrape off, would not expedite the process of doing the conservation overlay if that was one single aspect was initiated with the conservation overlay, and then we added things to the conservation overlay later.
So
It's a one single thing in the conservation overlay that you couldn't scrape a house. Would that speed things up?
generally that does not come with a conservation overlay district. Conservation overlays still allow things to get scraped. They just say, if you scrape, here's the form that you have to fit in when you rebuild. Because I mentioned, historic preservation is the side where you're looking at no scrapes.
And so that would be a zoning matter for this particular neighborhood? If we wanted to pass a law saying that no scrape could happen in this boundary?
That would probably be a separate matter for City Council rather than a specific zoning matter. Because that wouldn't be part of our zoning code, would be just a separate ordinance.
If I may, one thing I think I'd like to suggest, we have a lot of people waiting with questions. I'd love for you to stand up if you have questions so that we can be sure we don't miss you. But one thing I do want to say is this. I've certainly heard from a lot of people who have the impression that in doing something like this, there may be a group of people in our neighborhood who make decisions on what flies and what doesn't fly. That's not going to be the case. So this is our opportunity to see what flies and doesn't fly. Right here, right now, I'd like to suggest that we keep things kind of simple and basic. For example, because you have had a lot of questions about the idea of scraping off, you know, do we all agree that we would prefer, if there is a scrape off, that anything that goes up in place of that dwelling needs to be consistent with the character of the neighborhood? Let's start with that. Let's just start with whether we can agree with that. And we can make some notes on this whiteboard, but, okay, please, go ahead. I know you've had your hand up for ages.
So Isaiah, my question is, I think, so I'm not where I'm,
What I'm hearing from you all who are part of the city is there is no format, that there are no rules, that there is no advisory, that there's no form that you can fill out, nothing, absolutely nothing. And that whatever we do, we're starting from scratch. So whether, I don't necessarily agree that the place to start is no scrapes, although I am in favor of conservation district. I've lived in a place that had an historic district, and it was a bloody nightmare. But we've got to do something.
Thank you.
I just want to address that really quickly. We do have a historic preservation ordinance.
I'm not talking about historic preservation.
I mean, we passed that based on requests from citizens. We thought we were being responsive to what citizens wanted to preserve historic properties. We learned later that there were some concerns specifically about the uniqueness of Arapaho Acres, that the current ordinance it passed was insufficient for some of the things that you all wanted. So I'm here tonight to say, can I make the code better to serve your neighborhood, to give you the option to protect your neighborhood? And so if I can do something before my term is up to make this better for you, if that's what you all decide, then I'm happy to go carry the water on city council to get it done for you, whatever you decide. So that's where we're at.
Tom, your question. So I have a question. So if everybody in our neighborhood decides no scrapes, can that be written into the code? You can't scrape the house to our neighbors?
No, it's my understanding that we'd have to do a historic district for that. And my encouragement is I think that the scrape issue in this context is probably going to be a non-starter. And I would encourage you to think about what is possible within the code.
But why is it a non-starter? If everybody in my neighborhood said no sprays, why is that a non-starter? And why can't you use that to build on? We start with no sprays, and then we say, maybe we want a conservation overlay, and then maybe we go someplace else. But if we don't start at the ground floor, somebody could come in tomorrow and spray the house. And that's not what the people, at least why are standing up there is either done. That's not what people want.
Okay, I'd like to actually throw in a comment on that, which is that it seems to me one of the problems we do have that we are facing in this neighborhood, the reality is it is a 75-year-old neighborhood. There are probably some houses that if they changed hands right now, somebody might come in and be alarmed at the level of work that was required to bring that house up to today's standards of living. So I would like to suggest that my guess is that most people could live with the idea of a scrape off if something compatible went up in its stead. And the beautiful thing is, when something compatible goes up in its stead, maybe you can make it energy efficient. Maybe there could be a lot of things done for a rebuilt house that did not factor in the houses that we live in. I often raise my hand and talk with my neighbors about this a lot. My house is terribly insulated. I don't think insulation was a concern in the 50s, right? We've heard from people who are saying, what if I want to turn my carport into a garage? We're really not talking about restricting people's ability to do that. So I would really like to say that I think that if we insist on the idea of no scrape-offs, we're going to have a problem, because what Adam was explaining with his own experience with overlays so far, that's not constructive. We need to be constructive here, and we need to realize, well, what do we want to see in this neighborhood? And we want to probably fix up some of the houses that are falling into disrepair. And I don't think it's fair to burden somebody when a house changes hands with an impossible undertaking. And I think otherwise, okay, so,
I looked at insulation and like, what? Because
okay,
Barbara,
yes.
Point Building, Milton, and Paper Break Place. Just, yeah.
Lisa? Oh, no, okay.
Well, I will keep it brief. First of all, everything that almost everybody is saying, you folks and the people out here and whatnot, we are scanning in a blizzard of uncertainty. And we're not going to answer but a small fraction of these questions tonight. And I came here a skeptic about the issues because I didn't understand what our starting point is. You referred to coming up with a starting point. We're still in the locker. We've not had a starting point. And I think we should be satisfied with understanding that, and a path forward has to be to map out where we stand right now. I also came here from there and I want to volunteer to be involved in this. But here's three things that I would like to see. I'd like to see a directory or an agenda of all the people on the city side and in the neighborhood side who are already active in this, so we can start with a starting point of an organization. We'd like us to start with the activities with mapping what our status is. Part of my objection is we can't know what to do because we don't know where we are. We don't have a way out of this, the map out of this. So the first thing we have to do in this process of whether or not we're going to apply for a conservation overlay is figuring out where we stand and how that is going to move forward.
It's okay.
Let me just a couple extra points. I did a little homework and I found several examples, including North Carolina, Philadelphia, and Congress Park, with a lot of good detail about how this process could work. Right. So we have examples that follows. And as to the uncertainty, I think I have one benchmark for that. 2 years ago, what did you call it? Code Dex? I've forgotten how I found out about it, but to start, I found out about it, read about it, what they doing. And so I started reading further. I found out that there were two groups who filed petitions, meaning getting signatures and filed petitions, opposed to what part of Code Next did. And one of the elements in there was allowing more freedom on detached buildings behind all that it was street facing. And the possibility, as I understood it correctly, particularly if I'm wrong, the possibility that those detached buildings could be inhabited by non-family members. And in there. Oh, the third point was when I stuck my nose into saying, well, and I got these petitions. I did that because I got a postcard in the mail from the city that said, there are people petitioning against this measure, and that's a waste of resources for us to bother with. I would point to Amendment 1 in the U.S. Constitution, which says we have the right to petition.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I have to stop you. I have to stop you because we have probably 5 more people who've been waiting, and you've been way over 2 minutes here.
Let me finish our sentence, please. I think denying the right to petition is grounds for dismissal.
Okay. First of all, I would like to ask a follow-on question to what you just mentioned. It's delightful to hear that people might want to get involved in crafting something moving forward. I would love a show of hands on how many people would show up for another meeting, because it was difficult getting you here tonight, okay? I had to beg, borrow, and steal. I'm going to say that. I'm just going to be very, very frank about it. It's frustrating to me that I have to reach out more than once or twice or 3 times to anybody to say, are you coming, to something that is important to the neighborhood? The fact that everybody is here makes me feel that it is important to the neighborhood, but I do keep wanting to repeat the point. We had a blank slate. And so I think we really have a great opportunity right now to say, what are a few things that everybody can agree on that we'd like to see protected here in this neighborhood? Can we do that much? And then can we convene again perhaps to try to craft more, but we need to move quickly before things happen. To Adam's point, we could have somebody come in and we could have them scrape a house and we could have them put something up. Okay, Lisa, please.
Yeah, this is just and maybe it's something so you respect SDG. Has anybody done take current economic evaluation of what property? How large Arapaho Acres need to start scraping off, and even if they're rebuilding or in some sort of pure or whatever, what happens to present values of homes in the national system as we once the homes
They go down.
Yes. Okay, yes.
I've had some experience with things like this. It's in Arizona. Either farmers idea about different towns and children and equal opportunity of people pursuing decimators reception with a marvelous idea bill. I'm just doing a children at the other end. This get to head the coppers do that slash blood. And I was talking to a wonderful state senator, and this is a question for you. He said, it's a marvelous idea. Right, fantastic. Right, it won't be anywhere unless we have the votes. Do you think that something like this could possibly get the votes in a timely manner? We're all old before we all die off. And that's what it was that because we're starting to extract. It's just as I started to extract in Arizona. And it passed. We got the books. But do we have the books? Do you think that there's enough there to be so specific to our neighborhood to pass a conservation overlay?
Well, I love your pragmatism. Yes, this, in my opinion, is highly doable for a couple of reasons. And I know you all are going to have a lot of opinions on exactly what the overlay might look and what freedom it would give you on your property, what protections. That's actually not the debate you're having tonight. The debate is, do you even want the option to have an overlay district? Because that's the first step, and then I can go back and do that. The reason I think it's possible is because we had a majority of support on council for historic preservation, and we did that based on what the historian experts in our city asked us to do. There were some people who wanted to be at 75%, residents, who wanted at 50% resident support. We landed at 65. I can go back and say there is a special neighborhood in my district that didn't get exactly what they needed out of that. We need to go in and make a fix. We need to add another tool to the toolbox for them. Now then, how you use that tool is a separate conversation, and that's for you all to debate when we get to that point. But in the near term, do you even want the tool is the question. If you all decide you do, and what I need to know is there a majority that you actually want that? So we don't want to go through all of that if you're not going to actually want it. But if you do, then we can start working on it. The other thing I'll just say, for those of you who are following local elections, my term is up at the end of this year, and we're working on this issue with some of your neighbors for almost 3 years now. But actually, the candidate for this district is right here. His name is Jack. He's already learning about this issue before he gets elected. So I just want you to know, there are people on council who will carry this forward.
Thank you. And so the idea is we do need 65% of the eligible households, which means everybody who's a homeowner ID. Go ahead.
Just wanted to mention that I hope again my beloved since we're in a historic Elizabeth neighborhood, we put tax rails in the span. And we did a remodel on our house. We put insulation in, we put it in roof, gets up a bunch of stuff, and got $30,000 in that. So, that's true. Help to you is
Yeah, and that's something that's available now. And if you aren't aware of that, contact me or I can direct you to some people to contact. But if you have a project that's above a minimum budget and you're willing to preserve the character of your home and go through the process of getting it approved and then having them watch you go through the process, you can get access to considerable money. And they just changed the law, I think it was this year, that now makes those tax credits refundable. Exactly. Which means that you don't actually have to, go to have it against your tax bill over several years. You can actually get that whole lump sum all at once when you file your taxes, which is amazing.
And as a city, we're in the process of becoming a certified local government, which means you get more opportunities. If you get a local designation, there's more opportunity for tax payments.
With that, I guess investing this and realizing that we're starting to draft and have you been talking about this, I don't know, will come during almost 20 years or over 1 year, swing. You know, this has come up over and over again, and I get the impression that the city doesn't actually value us as a neighborhood. That in all these conversations, why haven't you come up with a plan for us? And I guess I'll look at you, and I don't think I'm going to ask any more questions, but I actually think you, and whoever else is at the table of the city needs to come up with a solution for us and bring it back to them.
I'm just go ahead if I be and see the city's doing going to pass. Oh, it's not the other way around. They're not gonna hold our hands.
I think they should. We're a value our. Here's what I'll say is him.
May I get my card?
You know, I want to point this out. Like, I mean, I think there's I hear a lot here the generally supportive of the idea of conservation overlay. Right? This sounds like cool, but the devil is in the details. You have no details, right? I mean, I don't think that's a detriment. I think it's just it's 39 or whatever, right? So like, what would one? That's a long discussion, and I think like to your point, like, what is the I don't know where to go. There it is. Like, what does a neighborhood look like? Like, how do you incorporate that? Like, the example we have is neighborhoods that were built on the exact same floor plans or the exact same house. That's not us. Like, that's the beauty here, right? So like, you do a lot of work to do to figure out what that would be. So like, I mean, I guess I'll just end with my opinion, which is conservation overlay. I came in a little skeptical. I feel like it has like some very valuable elements that could be built upon, but I don't want to just say yes to like a blank slate, because feels like there's so many details to get there. So I think that's just.
And that's a fair point. But again, I think we start somewhere.
Yeah.
We start somewhere. We agree on something that we would like to start with. And the key question is, and this is a great moment to ask this question. Show of hands, please. How many people like the concept of creating something where we say what we want for our neighborhood? Beautiful. Okay. That's what we need. That's what we need. We need to come together, and the fact is we're kind of there in terms of we could craft something, but we have to have another meeting. We have to have a turnout. I have to beg you to come again. I have to beg you to ask your neighbor to come who didn't come. Because again, we need 65% of eligible homeowners. And so we calculated earlier that something like 113 yes votes that we would need to do this. But I do think we can start small. I do think we can say, what if we say, and Adam, would you be willing to go to the whiteboard for us and having, I think Adam's experience, in his own neighborhood with Harvey Park, starting to explore these things should come in very handy for us, even if it is a different neighborhood and the construction is different and so on. I think and Sandra, I see your hand. I think perhaps we could write one or two things that we'd like to start with that we can all agree on tonight, and then we refine. But I don't want us to leave here without having something concrete and a germ here that, that is going to build. But Sandra, what was your question?
It isn't really a question. My comment is that when I heard about this meeting, this is the first I've heard about this idea, although 30 years ago we talked about the same thing. And I think it's very premature. I want to do, but I want to know who the people are that are going to write this plan out.
We are the people who are going to write it out.
I know, but are we going to get to vote on who the people are? I mean,
this is why it's a democratic process. The idea is everybody in the room has a say. 65% of people is what we need, so we know there are going to be some people who are not going to be happy.
but some people are going to actually write up the plan for the conservation.
It's gonna be like this. It's gonna be hanging up with something on a whiteboard, putting it in a black and white version, sending it out in the neighborhood to say, this is what we're putting forth. If you have any objections to what just got crafted, please let us know. Devin, I see you. And please let us know, and then we will submit it by such and such a date. But I really think we should be able to hammer something out tonight. Devin.
Just can I make a quick side note? In the case of Persona Park, they hired an architect to help them actually write it. You're probably going to have to do the same thing. With the Bay meeting, we have to do some fundraising or something.
It's been done. It's given out to every new homeowner, and the old ones have it. It's there. It has guidelines.
There are plenty of us in text and listen.
But as far as how to write an overlay that can be enforced, you're going to need help to do that.
With the language, in other words, that makes total sense. So Devin, yes.
The thing be willing and able to help us craft the language as necessary, because I'm hearing that there's some reluctance to move forward with this because we don't feel like we had adequate resources, right? So is the city able to help us in some manner, given that we do have design experts in the neighborhood? We're not starting from scratch. It is doable, but we really would appreciate some assistance from the city of Englewood.
Sure. So from the planning side, we do help you. Your roles would go into the code that I helped write. So yes, I will help you. My team will help draft the ordinance, at least from that section. The Historic Preservation Commission helped write Chapter 12, different city functions help to write the code that we have. So yes, we would help that far. But as far as identifying, if you're going to go the overlay route and you're trying to identify the form and function, yes, that generally is done by an architect. We just help put it into our code language.
But I would also say, though, Bryan has been working on this issue for a couple of years already. So we're already, as staff and city council, talking to some of your neighbors who are bringing this idea forward to helping organize this meeting, say, okay, what would it look like? So we are happy to help. We're already in the conversation. Sorry, CJ.
So the main thing I think that did come up is the book we have that every owner should have actually states in there design guidelines. Can we use that as a base?
Not for conservation overlay, because conservation overlays do not dictate design detail.
So if it's things like talk about like your roof pitch.
That's not all there until moment.
I just heard a great suggestion from the audience. Somebody said, stop using the term blank slate. Let's call this a brainstorming session. But how about we write down a few things on the board that we think we might like to think about and ask for, and take it from there. Diane.
It seems to me that what he's kind out of this meeting isn't the first draft of some kind of overlay plan. That obviously lies in the future.
I've already said that. No, it's not
one thing that we want to do, if we want to authorize our city council person to go ahead and begin discussing with council the legal steps to get the ability to put the overlay in.
I already have the impression that the city council is ready to take this forward for us. But we have to be united with there, so there's no point in our asking them to spin their wheels until we know the people in this room want to do this.
I think it's meaning if the script we have on here, the city ordinance would apply simplified, right? If
Or building over
big conservation overlays apply when it's any neighborhood or Arapaho Acres, where they would then be able to apply for a conservation overlay. That is what the city's work would be. It would have to go through council.
True. So it will be creating this opportunity that any portion of the city could use.
Which we go into that. And then within that ordinance, there would be a process by which an interested neighborhood would come forth to begin working with City of Planton on what the overlay would be. But that would be dictated by what's the coordinates.
Yeah, by what's adopted to the coding.
Is there are there model codes that have, as a renter, we already know what the next step is. So it's not, us authorizing something is totally premature because we're not like there's nothing to. You're not going to create the Arapaho Acres conservation as part of that, right? You're going to pass your ordinance first, and you will then pass as a part of or under that ordinance.
That's what I think though.
Forward with the ordinance unless you weren't there, because no one else is asking for it. So it's either its current status quo, which you don't have the option, or if you all want it, then I'll.
But the city ordinance have no specificity to our neighborhood. It'll be our conservation overlay can sit just a step at some point to be done.
So how do you authorize you to go ahead and approach council on our behalf? Since this is going to be a citywide ordinance, it's not going to be as a Arapaho Acres ordinance. It's unspecific to us. So I can't see how a 65% vote from us would be needed in order for you to approach council and begin that process to get an overlay option in place.
Sure, very good question. So to do the overlay ordinance, as Bryan laid out, it's about 5 months of staff time. So my colleagues are going to say, why would we ask staff to do this if no one really wants it or if no one's going to use it? And if I can say, actually, the same amount of people that we need for a historic district want this in Arapaho Acres, they're going to say, oh, then that's worth it. It's worth putting in all of our staff time. It's worth us putting in time, planning and zoning putting in their time, because there is a majority of citizens in the neighborhood who want to use this tool. I need that to be able to tell them. I also invite all of you to come to City Council and give public comment and tell my colleagues if you want this, so that we can get that done. But if there's only 10% of you who want it, then they're not gonna want to spend staff time on it.
So what do you want? A letter from the neighborhood saying that you have taken a vote and a 65% of the deed property owners?
I will defer
proceed.
the voting process to our organizer here and how they have that set up. Then they give some ballots in the back. I'm not sure.
Hey, ballots in the back of the room, and we've already had a lot of people turn them in, it sounds. And that is basically in the idea that we support the idea of an overlay, but it's not specific yet. So in other words, we're not taking anything to City Council until we know what we're asking for. Yes, I.
But to be clear,
but yes. So Adam was just pointing out. It sounds like what we really need to know tonight is: will the City Council ask for the ability to have an overlay?
City Council needs to pass a law to even allow for an overlay to be possible.
And then once we know that that would be possible on that civic level, that's when we as a neighborhood come together again. We say, okay, what would we like to see? I still think it would be extremely helpful for us to have some idea of what protections people feel are the most important for our neighborhood before we part ways tonight. Again, brainstorming, but yes, I know you catch a bando. Go ahead.
Well, I think one of the problems you're raising right now is that there's too many unknowns. And Prasanna has already gone through the trouble of creating this thing from scratch, and now they have an invoice that's operating. Perhaps a handout just showing the basic points of what that looks like.
I'll repeat the question, which is that he's suggesting that because Prasanna has been through this process, maybe it would be helpful for us to pass out some information and say, here's what they went through for the process.
As a result, same about that, we could add this track that would greatly simplify the process.
Right, and that was shown on the screen. But yes, exactly. You know, these are the elements that went into that particular one. So yes, there is that. And let me see, you had a question.
Oh, sorry. I was just starting right away and what you were saying. So it sounds like some cases you want like this venue of option. So like we're talking about routes, right? Like 1.5 times the main story. Because that's you're trying to get right. Like very basic guidelines, but it seems like people want that just that a little bit before they start by creating a practice. Is that what you're saying? I was trying to restate. Yes.
Yes. So essentially, I think with our votes tonight, we are going to be asking, City Councilor to move forward with creating an opening for us to ask for an overlay, right? And to have the framework in place.
I hear the desire for like, what does this look like? And it's so many unknowns. I was just chatting with Bryan. The conservation overlay ordinances are all kind of similar. It would look roughly similar to what the process is in Denver. So if you're trying to understand what would this process be, that we would look at these also with the other cities and figure out what could like fit for Englewood. But it's not like the process is going to be dramatically different than what they have in Denver. So that's what you can expect, and then how you would offer it within that. So if that gives you a little bit of clarification.
Thank you, Chelsea. Okay. I think we're reaching, yes, going to one way. I think one or two more questions, but I think we probably are at our wrap-up point.
Yeah, I've been here since 1969, big and big. I propose for this a conversation term overlay as hell as slow things that will ever get through. It possible. The other thing is, I would like to see Tristana Bart's details, not the rest of it that's cracked. We don't have to do the things. That's damn good information. Those are the issues we'll be faced with. Sometimes this time. I don't, if I had the money when I moved in, I would have put on a second story. But that would have been a mistake. Because this is a hell of a great paper with. And it's easy to screw on. So, I'd like to send it to everybody on your list, the Crescendo Park stuff. We don't have to copy it, but those are the damn issues we'll be arguing about. So let's see it.
Okay, were there a few more data?
One more quick thing. I guess I'm not there at why Arapaho Acres is being asked to carry the entire spur of making this request for the conservation to be enabled, because there are a lot of sections in the conscious plan, precisely, that speak to neighborhood conservation, and the Englewood should be doing this as a city of Englewood, so that you can act those provisions that Scotland has planned in neighborhood conservation and as preservation. It is something that it should be burdening the neighborhood to do all of the collegialities that we're going to have to do for this one simple step, just to give us the opportunity to do what the neighborhood is looking to do.
It's being done that way because you're the only folks that are asking for it. No other part of the community is asking for conservation around it.
It's a plan 6 type conservation. This is the tool you've been using.
It is. So we generally try not to create tools that are not going to be used. This is the first time anybody has ever asked us. 2 years ago was the first time I got a phone call about conservation overlay. I can't speak to my predecessors. Historic preservation has been something that was discussed for a long time. You can ask CJ. She was part of our commission for a very long term.
So that's very long.
And it was a long time getting to where we are now with it. So that came about because people wanted the process. So same thing. And nobody's asking anyone to go talk to the entire city. We're just, I think what Chelsea, Councilwoman Nunnenkamp is asking is, does this neighborhood even want to go down our process? If not, it's likely that we wouldn't look at, my team would not start looking at conservation overlay as a tool, because then again, there's no desire people to use it.
Really all that, the only ask is call or email your councilwoman and tell her you want this. That's all you need to do.
I would, yes, but really, I would love to see the list. The ballots that you guys, that your guys are receiving or putting together, will give me the list together. And I would just also say, I'm happy. I don't want to couldn't undo working on this community, and I'm sorry it feels that way. I am not confident that I can get 4 votes on city council unless I can show them that people actually want this. Because they're going to say, that's a big waste of time to know cities that we already have historic preservation. And I need to explain why that's sufficient for you. And I need you to tell me why.
Got it. And this is to be defined. This is to be defined as we meet again, and as we exchange more ideas and so forth. This is not cast in stone. This is just concept. You want to have the ability to ask. And I'm sensing, that especially with the willingness of everybody to come back and meet again, that the support is there. So I think we can probably wrap it up unless there were a few final comments, questions from anybody. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I hope with this discussion